March 15, 1943. Outside Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The scorching desert sun beat down on Technical Sergeant Howard Mitchell as he wiped sweat from his brow, leaving another streak of black oil across his forehead. Around him, the motor pool of the 2nd Armored Division lay in disarray. 12 Sherman tanks and 7 half-tracks sat immobilized, their engines seized from the relentless North African sand and inadequate lubrication. In less than 48 hours, these vehicles were expected to support a critical offensive against Rommel's retreating forces. Mitchell believed he had just enough time to get perhaps half of them operational again. He had no idea that within 3 weeks, his name would reach the desk of General George Patton himself, or that his desperate experiment born of necessity would change the face of Allied logistics for the remainder of the war. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how one man's unorthodox solution to a critical mechanical problem not only saved countless American lives, but fundamentally altered how the Allied forces approached vehicle maintenance during World War II, ultimately contributing to a logistical advantage that helped win the war. Sergeant Mitchell had not always been a military man. Back in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he had owned a moderately successful automotive repair shop, specializing in difficult cases other mechanics had given up on. At 37, he was older than most of the men in his unit, with thinning brown hair that receded from his temples and hands perpetually stained with grease despite vigorous scrubbing. His weathered face carried deep laugh lines around his eyes, though he smiled less frequently since arriving in North Africa 4 months earlier. "Goddamn sand," he muttered, staring into the exposed engine block of a Sherman tank. "Tears these engines apart faster than the Germans ever could." Corporal David Levinson, a 23-year-old former accounting student from Philadelphia, looked up from the half-track he was attempting to service. "How bad is it, Sarge?" "Bad enough. Bearings are shot to hell. That's the 3rd one today. At this rate, we'll be pushing these tanks into battle ourselves." Mitchell wiped his hands on an already filthy rag. "And we're down to our last crates of replacement parts." 800 miles away on the same day, Oberst Wilhelm Reiter of the German 21st Panzer Division faced a similar crisis, though for different reasons. Standing in a cavernous maintenance depot near Bizerte, he surveyed the 57 tanks and vehicles in various states of disrepair. Unlike the Americans, it wasn't just sand causing their problems, it was the catastrophic failure of the German supply lines. "How many liters of oil do we have left?" Reiter asked his logistics officer, Hauptmann Kurt Müller. Müller consulted his meticulously kept ledger. 784 liters, Herr Oberst. At current consumption rates, that will last approximately 2 weeks. Reiter's thin lips pressed into a grim line beneath his neatly trimmed mustache. "And our requisition?" "Denied again, sir. Italian naval losses in the Mediterranean have reached 60%. The High Command has prioritized fuel over lubricants. They suggest we economize." Reiter gave a short, humorless laugh. "Economize. Next, they will tell us to lubricate our tanks with olive oil." He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking every day of his 52 years. "Very well. Implement rationing immediately. Reduce oil changes to absolute minimum intervals." As Müller departed, Reiter stared at the massive Tiger tank being serviced before him. Its complex engineering required precise maintenance schedules. The irony wasn't lost on him. Germany produced the world's most advanced armored vehicles, yet couldn't keep them running due to something as basic as lubricating oil. Back at the American position, Mitchell sat alone in the makeshift workshop tent after sunset, illuminated by a single kerosene lamp. The day's repairs had gone poorly. Only 3 vehicles had been returned to operational status, and 2 more had broken down during the afternoon. His requisition for additional parts and lubricants had been denied. Higher priority shipments were headed to units directly engaged with enemy forces. He pulled out a battered leather notebook filled with mechanical notes and formulas accumulated over 20 years of working with engines. Flipping through the pages, he stopped at a section titled Emergency Measures. Mitchell had developed these notes during the Great Depression, when his customers couldn't afford proper parts or materials. He'd become known for keeping vehicles running long past their expected lifespans through creative solutions and improvised repairs. One entry caught his eye. Oil extender for dust conditions. It described a mixture he had developed for farmers during the Dust Bowl years, a blend of standard motor oil enhanced with graphite powder, a small amount of vegetable oil, and, curiously, a measure of common soap. Crazy idea, he muttered to himself, but desperate times. The following morning, Mitchell approached Captain James Harrington, the company commander, with his proposal. "You want to do what?" Harrington asked, his skepticism evident in every syllable. At 30, Harrington was a career military man with little patience for unconventional approaches. "A modified oil mixture, sir, something I developed back home for dust conditions. It might help our engines withstand the sand better and extend the time between maintenance cycles. And you want to experiment with this on military vehicles during an active campaign?" Harrington's eyebrows rose toward his helmet. "Just on 2 vehicles to start, sir. 2 that are already sidelined. If it works, it could solve our breakdown problem. If it doesn't, we've lost nothing we haven't already lost." Harrington studied the older man for a long moment. "You were a civilian mechanic before the war, right?" "Yes, sir, 15 years with my own shop." After another pause, Harrington nodded. 2 vehicles. You have 48 hours to show me results. After that, we go back to standard procedures. Understood?" "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Mitchell immediately set to work. From the mess tent, he procured a supply of cooking oil and soap. Graphite was more difficult, but he found a supply in the artillery section, where it was used to lubricate certain gun mechanisms. Working through the night with Corporal Levinson, Mitchell drained the oil from 2 vehicles, a half-track and a jeep, and replaced it with his special mixture. By dawn, both were running, though the real test would come with sustained operation. "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever been part of," Levinson said, watching Mitchell add the final components to a barrel of the mixture. "Soap in an engine? The mechanics back home would have a heart attack." Mitchell grinned. "Sometimes ridiculous works. The soap creates a different kind of film on the metal surfaces. The graphite provides solid lubrication where the oil film breaks down, and the vegetable oil has different viscosity properties that help in extreme heat." "If you say so, Sarge," Levinson shook his head. "But if this works, I'll eat my helmet." By midday, both test vehicles had been running continuously for 6 hours without issues, an impressive feat given the conditions. Mitchell monitored them closely, checking temperatures and listening for troubling sounds. Captain Harrington approached as Mitchell was examining the half-track's engine. "Well, am I looking at a miracle or a disaster waiting to happen?" "So far, so good, sir. Engine temperature is running 15 degrees cooler than normal, and there's noticeably less metal particulate in the oil." Harrington frowned. "Explain that in terms a non-mechanic can understand." "The engine is happier, sir. The mixture is protecting it better from the sand and heat." Across the Mediterranean, in Stuttgart, Germany, Dr. Elsa Hoffmann stood in her laboratory at the Daimler-Benz research facility, reviewing test results from experimental lubricants. As one of the few female engineers in the Reich's industrial complex, she had faced considerable skepticism, but her brilliance had proven undeniable. Specializing in tribology, the study of friction, lubrication, and wear, she had been tasked with finding solutions to the Wehrmacht's growing maintenance problems. "These results are promising," she said to her assistant, Heinrich Weber. "The synthetic oil performs 37% better than standard formulations under extreme conditions." Weber nodded, "But production costs remain prohibitive, and the catalysts required are in critically short supply." Hoffman sighed, pushing a strand of gray-streaked dark hair behind her ear. "We have the technology but not the resources to implement it at scale. A perfect example of our current predicament. The High Command continues to request solutions that can be implemented immediately, with existing materials," Weber added. "Then we shall have to disappoint them again." Hoffman turned back to her microscope. "Science cannot be rushed, nor can it create resources from nothing." What neither Hoffman nor the German High Command realized was that their American counterpart had already found a solution using only what was readily available, not through sophisticated research, but through practical experience and necessity-driven innovation. By the 4th day of testing, Mitchell's ridiculous oil mixture had been deployed in 15 vehicles, all of which were performing remarkably well. Sand infiltration was still occurring, But the damage to engine components had decreased dramatically. Most importantly, vehicles were requiring maintenance every 300 hours of operation instead of every 75, a fourfold improvement. Captain Harrington had gone from skeptical to cautiously optimistic. "I've forwarded your results to battalion headquarters," he told Mitchell. "They're interested enough to send someone to see for themselves." That someone turned out to be Colonel Walter Bradford, the division's chief of maintenance operations. A tall, austere man with piercing blue eyes and a reputation for by-the-book operations, Bradford arrived with clear skepticism written across his features. "Show me these miracle vehicles, Captain," he said to Harrington, not bothering to acknowledge Mitchell directly. For the next 3 hours, Bradford inspected vehicles, questioned mechanics, and reviewed maintenance logs. Finally, he addressed Mitchell. "Sergeant, your mixture violates at least 7 maintenance protocols. It risks voiding equipment warranties and contradicts every manual the Army has published on vehicle maintenance." Mitchell stood at attention. "Yes, sir." "However," Bradford continued, "your results are impossible to ignore. The division is losing an average of 17 vehicles daily to maintenance issues. If your solution cuts that even in half, it would be significant." "Thank you, sir. I'm authorizing a wider test, 30 vehicles across 3 different units. You'll document everything meticulously. After 2 weeks, we'll evaluate." Bradford fixed Mitchell with a stern gaze. "If this turns out to be a fluke or causes long-term damage, your career in the Army is finished, understood?" "Perfectly, sir." After Bradford departed, Levinson approached Mitchell. "Looks like I might be eating my helmet after all, Sarge." Mitchell allowed himself a small smile. "Better start salting it." The expanded test began immediately. Mitchell trained mechanics from 2 other companies on preparing and applying his mixture. Some were resistant, viewing the unorthodox approach with deep suspicion. "You expect me to put soap in a 15-ton tank?" Staff Sergeant Frank Morelli asked incredulously. "My grandfather was a mechanic. He'd roll over in his grave." "Your grandfather didn't have to keep vehicles running in the North African desert with limited supplies," Mitchell replied. "Trust me, or rather, trust the results. They speak for themselves." Gradually, as the mixture continued to prove effective, skepticism gave way to cautious acceptance. By the end of the 2-week test period, 92% of the vehicles using Mitchell's formula were still operational, compared to only 68% of those maintained with standard methods. More significantly, vehicles using the mixture required an average of 73% less maintenance time. For an Army on the move, this represented a crucial advantage. Colonel Bradford returned, this time accompanied by Brigadier General William Harrison, the division's second-in-command. "Sergeant Mitchell," Harrison said after reviewing the test results, "your innovation has attracted attention at the highest levels. General Patton has personally requested information about your formula." Mitchell's eyes widened. "General Patton, sir?" "Indeed, the General has a particular interest in anything that keeps his armored vehicles moving." Harrison handed Mitchell a sealed envelope. "These are orders transferring you temporarily to division headquarters. You'll be establishing a training program for mechanics throughout the 2nd Armored. Colonel Bradford will facilitate." Bradford, who had initially been so skeptical, now nodded with something approaching respect. "The mixture has been officially designated Lubricant Special Purpose North African Theatre, but unofficially, everyone's calling it Mitchell's Mix." As word of the new lubricant spread, its impact began to extend beyond mere mechanical efficiency. Lieutenant Robert Chen, a platoon leader in the 4th Armored Division, wrote in his diary on April 12, 1943, "The men's morale has improved remarkably since implementing the new oil mixture. Before, each day began with the question of which vehicles would break down and which men might die because their tank stalled during combat. Now, there's a growing confidence that our equipment will function when needed. The psychological effect cannot be overstated. Soldiers fight better when they trust their equipment." Not everyone embraced Mitchell's innovation. Major Theodore Wellington, a West Point graduate with a mechanical engineering degree, authored a scathing memo to division headquarters. "This miracle mixture represents a dangerous departure from established protocols. Anecdotal evidence is being prioritized over scientific testing and manufacturer specifications. While short-term benefits may be observed, I strongly caution against widespread adoption without proper laboratory analysis. The potential for catastrophic long-term damage to valuable equipment cannot be dismissed. Wellington's concerns were noted, but ultimately overridden by the immediate tactical benefits the mixture provided. As one field commander reportedly told him, "We're more concerned with winning the war this month than maintaining engines for a war 5 years from now." By early May, Mitchell's mix had been adopted throughout the American forces in North Africa. Technical Sergeant Mitchell found himself unexpectedly famous within military circles, conducting training sessions for mechanics across multiple divisions. During one such session, he met Sergeant Anna Kovacs, a Hungarian-American mechanical specialist attached to an auxiliary support unit. One of the few women working directly with combat vehicles, Kovacs had earned respect through sheer competence. "I've analyzed your formula," she told Mitchell during a break. "It's brilliant in its simplicity, but I think it could be improved further." Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "Oh, how so?" "The vegetable oil component becomes less effective in extremely cold conditions. If we substitute a portion with mineral oil and add a small percentage of alcohol, it should perform better across a wider temperature range." Mitchell considered this. "Making it useful beyond North Africa, you mean? In places like Italy or even Northern Europe?" "Exactly." Kovacs produced a notebook filled with precise chemical formulations. "I've done some preliminary calculations. With these modifications, the mixture could function effectively from -20 to +50 degrees Celsius. Mitchell studied her notes. "This is impressive work. Let's run some tests." Working together over the next 2 weeks, Mitchell and Kovacs developed what would become known as Mitchell's Mix Mark II, a more versatile version of the original formula. This collaboration would later evolve into a lifelong professional partnership and eventually marriage after the war, though that part of the story was still far in the future. As the North African campaign drew to a successful close, the impact of Mitchell's innovation came into sharper focus. A classified report prepared for Allied High Command in June 1943 stated, "The implementation of the specialized lubricant formula, Mitchell's Mix, has resulted in a 23% increase in operational vehicle readiness across affected units. Maintenance requirements have decreased by an estimated 67%, allowing for the reassignment of 428 maintenance personnel to other critical roles. Conservative estimates suggest this innovation has saved the equivalent of 78,000 man-hours and prevented the loss of at least 147 vehicles over the past 90 days. The report went on to recommend immediate adoption of the formula across all theaters of operation where appropriate. Meanwhile, the German forces continued to struggle with maintenance issues. In a captured document dated July 19, 1943, Generaloberst Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Armored Troops, wrote to Hitler's headquarters, "Our technical superiority is being systematically eroded by maintenance failures. While our Tigers and Panthers are individually superior to enemy tanks, their complex engineering demands precise maintenance that current field conditions cannot support. A Tiger tank requires an average of 14 maintenance hours for every operational hour, an unsustainable ratio. By contrast, American Sherman tanks, though technically inferior, remain operational under conditions that would immobilize our vehicles. This disparity in reliability is having greater tactical impact than comparative armor thickness or gun caliber." What Guderian could not have known was that the reliability gap had widened significantly due to one sergeant's improvised oil mixture. As the war progressed into Italy and later Northern Europe, Mitchell's innovation evolved. The Mark II formula, developed with Sergeant Kovacs, proved effective across a wide range of climates and conditions. By late 1943, it had been standardized throughout the European theater of operations and was being shipped to the Pacific for evaluation in tropical conditions. Captain James Harrington, now promoted to Major, wrote to Mitchell from Italy in December 1943. "Your miraculous concoction continues to give us an edge. The Germans can't figure out how our vehicles keep running on roads they deliberately contaminated with dust and debris. We captured a Panther last week. Beautiful machine, absolute nightmare to maintain. Their chief mechanic had been attempting to create something similar to your mixture, but couldn't get the formula right. He seemed more upset about that than about being captured. Mitchell himself had been commissioned as a lieutenant and transferred to a special technical division focused on field modifications and improvements. There, he assembled a team of practical-minded mechanics and engineers who shared his philosophy of simple, effective solutions using available materials. One of the most poignant testimonials came from Private First Class Samuel Williams, a tank driver with the 6th Armored Division during the Battle of the Bulge. In a letter home dated January 12, 1945, he wrote, "The temperature has been below freezing for weeks. German tanks are breaking down all around us. They simply weren't built for this weather. Meanwhile, Old Betsy, my Sherman, starts up every morning without complaint. Our mechanic says it's thanks to some special oil mixture invented by a sergeant in North Africa. Whoever he is, I owe him my life. Yesterday we had to make a quick retreat under fire. Every tank in our platoon started immediately and got away. The platoon from Baker Company, still using Standard Oil, had 2 tanks that wouldn't start. 8 men didn't make it out. By war's end, Mitchell's innovation had been officially credited with increasing Allied vehicle operational readiness by an average of 34% across all theaters. An Army study estimated it had saved more than 2,000 lives by preventing breakdowns in combat situations and had conserved enough maintenance hours to effectively add the equivalent of 3 additional armored divisions to the Allied forces without requiring additional personnel. In the immediate post-war period, the mixture was declassified and its formula published in technical journals. Automotive manufacturers initially dismissed it as a wartime expedient unsuitable for civilian vehicles. However, several independent studies confirmed its effectiveness, particularly in extreme conditions. Howard Mitchell, by then promoted to captain, left the Army in 1946 and returned to Oklahoma with Anna Kovacs, now his wife. Together, they founded Mitchell Specialty Lubricants, which grew into a successful business supplying custom oil formulations for everything from farm equipment to racing cars. The long-term impact of Mitchell's invention extended far beyond military applications. His approach to lubricant formulation, using readily available materials in novel combinations, influenced the development of synthetic oils in the 1950s and 60s. The principle of using detergent additives, first introduced in his original mixture with common soap, became standard practice in the petroleum industry. Dr. Wilhelm Osterhagen, a prominent German chemist who had worked on synthetic lubricants for the Wehrmacht, later wrote, "The most elegant solution is often the simplest." While German scientists pursued complex formulations requiring rare materials, an American sergeant combined common ingredients in a novel way to achieve superior results. It is a humbling lesson in practical innovation versus theoretical perfection. Mitchell himself remained modest about his contribution. In a 1967 interview, he stated, "I didn't do anything special, just applied what I'd learned keeping tractors running during the Dust Bowl." Necessity is a powerful motivator for creativity. When you don't have what you need, you make do with what you have. His former commanding officer, James Harrington, had a different perspective. Mitchell's mixture wasn't just about keeping engines running, it changed how we fought the war. Before, our tactics were constrained by maintenance concerns. After, we could push harder, go farther, take more risks. The Germans never understood how we maintained our advance pace. That tactical freedom was worth more than any weapon system. Perhaps the most telling testament came from General George Patton himself. In his personal papers, discovered long after his death, he had written, "Wars are won by slashing attacks, audacious maneuvers, and relentless pursuit, all of which require vehicles that move when ordered to move." Mitchell's contribution gave us that reliability. The significance of his humble oil mixture to our victory cannot be overstated. Today, the principles behind Mitchell's mix continue to influence modern lubricant formulations. The original handwritten formula is displayed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, a testament to how one individual's practical innovation can change the course of global events. Howard Mitchell died in 1982 at the age of 76, having lived to see his wartime improvisation evolve into standard practice throughout the automotive and industrial worlds. His obituary in the New York Times noted that his invention had been designated by the Army as one of the 100 technical innovations that helped win World War II. His wife and professional partner, Anna Kovacs Mitchell, continued their business until 1990, when she retired at the age of 71. Their children and grandchildren maintain a small museum in Tulsa, dedicated to Mitchell's work and the evolution of mechanical lubricants. The story of Mitchell's mixture demonstrates how wars are won not only through courage and sacrifice on the battlefield, but through ingenuity and problem-solving behind the lines. It reminds us that sometimes the most significant advantages come not from complex new technologies, but from creative applications of existing knowledge. In 1943, facing the harsh conditions of North Africa with inadequate supplies, Howard Mitchell didn't set out to make history. He simply wanted to keep his vehicles running. In doing so, he demonstrated that innovation often comes not from sophisticated laboratories, but from practical minds confronting real problems with limited resources. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.